Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I'm Valerie Jackson, Director of the Krulak Center. We have a full day ahead of us, and I'm grateful for all of you making the time to be here with us today. Senator Warner, sir, we're especially grateful to have you back here at Marine Corps University. General Gray, General Krulak, General Allen, and General Fulford, what an honor it is to have such lines of the Corps in our presence today. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you also to all of our distinguished general officers and guests, special visitors, and my fellow directors. It's my pleasure now to introduce the President of Marine Corps University, Brigadier General William Bowers.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. What a pleasure it is to welcome all of you to Marine Corps University. We're truly honored by your presence on this special day. To all of our general officers, flag officers, senior executive service members, sergeants major, thank you so much for joining us today. As Val Jackson mentioned, we'd like to extend a special welcome to Senator Warner, one of the true giants of our country. To our 29th Commandant and founder of Marine Corps University, General Al Gray. To the former commander of the 1st and 3rd Marine Expeditionary Forces, Marine Forces Pacific, and Task Force Ripper during Desert Storm, General Carlton Fulford. To General John Allen, former commander of all coalition forces in Afghanistan, and one of the greatest minds our Corps has ever produced, who gave such an incredible talk to our students earlier this month. And of course, to our guest of honor, the 31st Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Charles Krulak. For those of us who wear the Marine Corps uniform here, we know we're not only in the presence of living legends here in the front row, but giants of our Corps, all of whom have given so much to Marine Corps University over the years, and we're truly honored by their presence. The Krulak Center has been a success story. It's become an integral part of the education we provide to our students here at Marine Corps University. And to explain the genesis of the Brute Krulak Center for Innovation and Creativity, and to formally introduce our guest of honor, we're very pleased to welcome the former Commanding General of Marine Corps Combat Development Command, Lieutenant General Robert Walsh.
Oh, well, wow, what a great day, and I am absolutely humbled to be here today. This is just so exciting to be in front of this group and be here to introduce the Brute Krulak Center and be just a small part of this. Bill asked me to kind of take it back. Where did this all kind of come from? And I think if you step back, and I think it was 2015, we had a new commandant coming in, General Neller. We had a new Marine Corps Intelligence Agency report on where the threat was taking us. And the threat drives our concepts, and we're a concepts-based requirement system. So we started with that and said, well, how do we move forward? How do we innovate? How does this Marine Corps lead us in a new direction? And so I went over to Breckenridge Hall, and I sat down in Bill's conference room with his senior leaders, all the directors, and I sat down in that room, and I said, hey, we really need your help here, that we need to innovate, start moving the Corps forward in maybe a slightly different direction at that time that we didn't know. The Commandant had challenged us and directed us to do a force structure review, take a look at our concepts, take a look at our organization, training, equipping, and see where we needed to head. And when I sat in a room and asked for their help, not surprisingly, there was a little bit of friction in the room. And I felt some of that friction. And as you could imagine, asking them to change some of their processes maybe, look at the accreditation and whether that would be challenged. And I felt some of that friction in there. And as I paused, my mind just started to wander a little bit. And I looked at a brass plaque on the conference room wall in his conference room, an old brass plaque that said Marine Corps Schools Command. And that Marine Corps Schools Command made me sit there and think about people like General Brute Krulak General Gray, and General Krulak. And I looked at that and said, you know what? We're going to push through with this. And I said, I'm going to challenge you to come back to me on what we need to do to harness all the intellectual thinking that we've got in the Marine Corps with our students, our faculty, to help our Corps move forward in a new direction. And we kind of looked at that as an interwar year period, just as before World War II and after World War II, of which Brute Krulak was such a huge part of it right here at Quantico at Marine Corps Schools Command. And that interwar period, I went back to General Krulak's steady hand on McCittick and helping us and helping the Commandant on a steady route of march on where we needed to go. And one of the things General Krulak always preached was, unlike the other services, we had everything right here at Quantico, all in one place, as General Krulak liked to call it, one-stop shopping. And that one-stop shopping is truly our advantage to be able to pull things together. And I'd really step back and also, as General Krulak always ensured that we understood, was General Legeune's vision and General Gray's vision on the Marine Corps being one great university and General Gray's vision for actually building it what we have today. And what a beautiful day we have today. If you look around the university, you sit there and look at that vision that General Lejeune and General Gray had, and we'll get over to the Warner Center later, and that vision, and how lucky we are to have this as a place for our students to come together and really innovate and learn and create. That vision was really started by Bill's team in that room that day, that then came back with the Brute Krulak Center for Creativity and Innovation. That was their idea of how they could innovate. But there's so much more going on that is going on here at the university, of the students in seminars at Brigadier General Wortman's Marine Corps Warfighting Lab, the close tie between training command and all that tied together here, innovating and creating together. And I find it interesting that just a RAND report came out about a month ago, and the RAND report kind of binned all the services and kind of called them out on who they were and what they were. And it gave two attributes to each service, and the attributes they gave to the Marine Corps was the Marine Corps was the most paranoid service, but also the most innovative service. And I think all you have to do is, I'm sure General Krulak is looking down at us today and saying, Rand got it right. Because all you have to do is read First to Fight, and you understand why we are the most paranoid service. It's right there in that book. There's also a chapter called The Innovators in First to Fight. And that part about innovation, all you have to do, and Bill's team will talk about it today, is all the innovation that's gone on here, but also went on here while Brute Krulak was such a part of it, is really leads us in the direction that we're at today. So it's such an exciting day, and it's my honor to introduce General Krulak, our 31st Commandant. But I really don't have to say anything other than innovation runs in his veins. It's in his DNA. It comes from his old man. And it's passed down to all of us from generation to generation. So General Krulak, thank you very much for honoring us today.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. On behalf of my family, I thank all of you for coming out to honor my father and to inaugurate something that's critical for the health of our Corps, and that's this center. I thank two people, Lieutenant General Walsh, Brigadier General Bill Bowers, for having the courage and the foresight to develop this program. It is going to be very special for our Corps. It's been over 50 years since the Brute retired from the Marine Corps and over 10 years since he died. And this is the first time his beloved Corps has recognized him. And it was through the efforts of these two men. And it's deeply appreciated. I would be remiss without also paying my respects. I'm not going to get quite as flowery to the Secretary of the Marine Corps here. Secretary of the Marine Corps and Navy. Yeah, there you go.
You leave this story to me.
Okay, I will. And obviously, General Gray, who we're really honored to have, Carl Fulford, who is a real special individual, and then two people who probably know my dad better than anybody, other than the author, Robert Coram, and that's Colonel Russ Appleton and General John Kelly. John Allen, John Kelly. Yeah. John Allen, that's why the Commandant introduced me as Lieutenant General Krulak, so I don't know. That's both John and Russ served as my milsec and got to know my dad probably more closely than the average person, and certainly saw all sides of the Brute. And I can tell you he had such deep respect for both of you that it wasn't funny. And so I just want you to know that he's looking down and saying well done to both of you. I was hoping that Robert Coram was here today. Is Robert here? Yes. Where? Way in the back. The third person who knows my dad better than anybody, including probably myself, is Robert Coram. Great historian, great biographer, and a very special friend. Robert wrote the following. Hopefully, there you go. I want you to read that, and some of you will choke on it, but read it anyhow. Now, he asked me, as he was writing the book, he said, that's how I want to end this book. What do you think? And I said, I've got to read the book. If this is your thesis, I've got to read the book. And I did, and I read it as dispassionately as the son of the Brute can read anything. And I think the key is, obviously, the work benefited America. And I don't need to tell you all the stories. I mean, this young lieutenant in Shanghai jumping on or commandeering a Coast Guard cutter and sailing out into the middle of a Japanese amphibious landing, taking pictures and writing words and sketches, sending it back, and then coming together with a gent by the name of Andrew Jackson Higgins and coming up with something that called the Higgins boat. And sure enough, at the end of the war, Dwight Eisenhower said, it won the war, it for America. It being the Higgins boat. It was for America. He followed that up, as you all know, in a big battle for the survival of our Corps. But during that battle, he also attacked what was then the Department of Defense, the War Department. And the formulation of the Department of Defense and how it was structured began during that time frame. And then he followed it up with a series of pamphlets and documents that has eventually ended up with DOD pretty much the way he envisioned it, except way too big, way too big. You know, he went from there, everybody knows that you'll see it up in the Krulak Center, but the crazy guy hanging from a helicopter, dangling from a helicopter. The beginning, the proof that, hey, it can do more than just carry the mail and carry a couple of wounded Marines. It can carry troops. And not only did he try desperately to drive that home to our core, but he then wrote the doctrine that ended up as vertical envelopment. Pretty well unknown to many of you is that he served as the SACSA, the Special Advisor on Counterinsurgency and Special Activities, to the then President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. And during that time, he unearthed the Small Wars Manual and started upgrading and rewriting manual on counterinsurgency. He played a major role in John F. Kennedy's desire and mission to build a special forces, the Green Berets, that has ended up being the Special Operations Command. At the end of the day, you also see a poster up there that says "Truth to Power," with his hand in basically the chest of President Johnson, talking to him about the war in Vietnam and the strategy that was being executed at that time. It cost him, in most people's opinion, the commandancy. He's a remarkable, remarkable man who had an 800-pound brain. I've often thought, well, you know, where did it all really come from? What is it about this guy? And I think it is that he loved chaos. He just loved chaos, and he loved challenges. Chaos, where brilliant dreams are born. Before the beginning of great brilliance, there must be chaos. Before a brilliant person begins something great, he or she must look foolish to the crowd. I've been talking to the schools here over the past day, and I've driven this home time and time again. We are in the interwar years. We're back into chaos. You have, and I know that people that are sitting in the front row and others in the audience know how serious the issues facing the United States are today and how serious the issues facing the military are today. The world is changing rapidly, so rapidly that I'm not sure that we aren't just into chaos, but equally important, seeing the same type of change that occurred between World War I and World War II and World War II in Vietnam, except multiplied by a factor of 100. We need to have people who look foolish to the crowd. We need people who thrive on chaos and challenge. We need the person that will hang from the bottom of a helicopter just to prove that it can be more than something that carries the mail. And I think that this center is going to do that for us. Finally, I'm going to leave you with something that, and I've told this on very few occasions, but when my dad was dying, he got all of the boys together and he brought us to his house in California. It was kind of interesting because, as Russ and John know, he just chose to die. I mean, it was time. He said, hey, I miss my wife, and so he got us all together and basically said, 2 days from now, I'm going to the hospital, and that's going to be it, and God bless you all, we love you. But he said, I want you to, and Bill and Nick, my two brothers, walked out of the room. My dad grabbed me and he said, I want you to do something for me. And I said, what's that? And he said, every time you talk to any audience that has a single Marine in it, would you remind them of this? And so I'm following my father's orders. And what he's saying is, you know, we can do all these great things, and we do. And, you know, General Gray and his predecessors and war fighters, and aren't we wonderful? But at the end of the day, the American people care about one thing only. And that's that we meet their high, almost spiritual standards. And if we don't, Senator Warner would agree that the second we stop being the Marine Corps that builds and makes Marines, we're going to be in real trouble. And so he said, leave that for everyone to see, especially those who wear the uniform. And I would only add that in the time of social media, this becomes even more important. So I'm really proud of the young woman who's sitting over there, the young colonel who took this kernel of a thought and has turned it into an absolute marvel. And I'm so thankful that you all are here for the ribbon cutting and to see this special place that's going to foster the innovation needed to get through the chaos that we're about ready to go through. Valerie?
General officers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this landmark day for the Krulak Center. I know there are some in the audience who are wondering, what is the Brute Krulak Center for Innovation and Creativity, and why does MCU need one? I know I've been asked that more than a few times since my arrival back in July. But quite bluntly, we are the university's think and do tank, I like to say, and we need a Krulak Center because we're educating warfighters and our partners to plan and operate in the cognitive age. As Undersecretary of the Navy Modly stated, real security, our economic, political, and military security, exists in our combined ability to think creatively into the future, to learn as quickly and as well as we can the character of new technologies, and to imagine their possible applications to the threats of tomorrow. He stated it another way. We must have intellectual agility. The Krulak Center harnesses the expertise of its staff to provide students the operating space to hone and refine their intellectual agility. Lieutenant General Brute Krulak had intellectual agility. He was, as Dr. Robert Coram so aptly described him in his book, Brute, a hinge of history. I don't think any in this room can imagine World War II without the Higgins boat. Now, did the general need a special center in Quantico to help him dream up his many revolutionary ideas? The answer is no. But he did leverage his Quantico education, combine it with his insatiable curiosity and demand for efficiency and lethality in war, and cemented the Marine Corps' legacy of innovation into the American psyche. But if we're not vigilant, the Corps' innovation legacy could slip. The Krulak Center is a place where students imagine, question, explore, pursue, and fail outside of graded curriculum and graduation requirements. It's also a place where students and faculty can bring their ideas for research, leverage the network of the subject matter experts that we house and their networks, and provide a link for the university to the greater DoD, the Corps, the private sector, academia, U.S. government, think tanks, allies, entrepreneurs, and innovators. Over the past 9 months, through electives, war games, writing contests, and our lecture series, we've provided this opportunity for more than 1,700 students. Ladies and gentlemen, it takes extraordinary Marines in extraordinary times to shift the Corps in a direction that maximizes its utility to the nation. It takes enormous moral courage and perseverance, sometimes at the expense of a career, possible ridicule by naysayers, roadblocks by the establishment, or even disparaging tweets. We are aptly named. The Brute endured all of these, except the tweets, but I can only imagine what some might have tweeted about the general, especially President Johnson. Yet he continued to work tirelessly for what was good and right and necessary for our Corps and country. We will do the same with the help of all of you. And we must do the same to give our warfighters the tools to gain and maintain cognitive superiority. So at this time, you're probably anxious to see the proof in the pudding. In a few minutes, various students will get up and briefly share their experiences with programming or opportunities facilitated or provided by the Krulak Center this academic year. But first, I'd like to introduce the center's incredible staff. First, our McCuff-supported Bren chairs. We have Dr. Chris Young, Mr. Don Bishop, Dr. Chris Harmon, Dr. Jebna Donner, Dr. Brandon Valeriano, and Mr. J.D. Work. We are also fortunate to have the Middle East Studies as part of the Krulak Center, Dr. Amin Tarzi and Mr. Adam Seitz. And new this year to MCU, we have our first ever Professor of Energy Studies, Dr. Mike Baskin, and the glue that holds it all together and puts the fire in the engine, we have our U.S. Marines, Lieutenant Colonel Matt Chambliss, Major Tim Riemann, Major Rob Arant, Second Lieutenant Joe Hilliard, and Second Lieutenant Alan Stafford. Gentlemen, please stand. It's now my pleasure to introduce our best spokespeople, the students. First up is Captain Cunningham, who will be speaking about his experience with the Energy and Innovation Scholars Program.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. My name is Captain William Cunningham. I'm honored to be here today to speak with you about the Energy and Innovation Scholars Program. I'm humbled to be here at such a influential point in our Corps, the introduction of such a influential institution as the Brute Krulak Center. Hopefully in the next 5 minutes, I'm able to give you a small glimpse into one of the programs the Marine Corps as well as the Marine Corps University has leveraged and dedicated such huge support as well as financial support in order to introduce. I don't have many slides to go through. This is my only one, actually. But I'll start with just a small story of my experience here at MCU and with the program itself. Similar to the Krulak Center, the Energy and Innovation Scholars Program has just completed its introductory year, its inaugural year here at the university. It's enhanced our education both as EWS students, command and staff college students, and School of Advanced Warfighting students as a student body. The Innovation and Energy Scholars Program began as a study and discussion group that focused on understanding the idea behind operational energy, and properly managing source of energy could drastically stand to increase our lethality and readiness in real-world military operations. The theme that underpinned most of our events as a program was General Mattis's challenge to the DoD back in 2003 to unleash us from the tether of fuel. Our key learning events this year include a variety of guest lecturers and discussions spanning topics all the way from the DoD national strategy to the DoD operational energy strategy, and also examining private authors like Daniel Yergin and his articles concerning military energy and security markets. In October of last year, we had the privilege and honor to visit the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Denver, Colorado, run by the DOE. There, we were able to experience both the latest and most refined renewable energy technology that academia and industry has to offer, as well as attending the two-day Defense Entrepreneurs Forum in Denver, Colorado. Here we learned how to generate ideas, both innovative, and we also learned how to exercise principles of the lean startup business model as far as introducing our ideas. Subsequent sessions following the Denver trip focused on generating and developing innovative ideas to improve operational energy within the Marine Corps. These workshops that we did included practicing Stephen Blank's mission model canvas, and also learning how to pitch our ideas to key partners within the DoD and other innovative laboratories. I don't think anyone can argue the impact that this program has had on both the institution of MCU, but also the Marine Corps writ large. The success and influence of the program was blatantly apparent at this most recent CMC Innovation Challenge, where 3 of the 4 top finalists were students from this conglomerate of the ENISP. And I'd be remiss right now if I didn't take the opportunity in this public forum to recognize those individuals. So I'll go through those 3 teams that were top finalists. With the Resilient Military Installation Task Force, we had Captain Shubik, Captain Rollins, and Captain Patterson. If y'all could stand and be recognized, please. With the fuel foraging kit, we had Captain Rob Berg. I'm not sure if you're here today. There he is. And of course, with the energy training exercise, we had Captain Maddie Carroll and Captain Brendan Carroll in the back there. In conclusion, I'd like to put out a huge thank you to Dr. Baskin, our new professor here at Marine Corps University. He was the life and breath of this program throughout the entire process, and the last 8 months can really be attributed to his efforts, to his time and efforts. And also a big thank you to Brigadier General Bowers, Colonel Jackson, and Major Riemann for facilitating a most fulfilling year for us students. Thank you.
Good morning, Senator Warner, general officers, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lundgren, representing the Commandant of the Marine Corps Strategist Program. Also in the program here today is Lieutenant Colonel Scott Cuomo, Lieutenant Colonel Ian Campbell, and Major Adam Yang are also in the program. They're up in Toronto this week at the International Studies Association Academic Conference. And then the third cohort consists of Major Nate Fleeshaker and Major Jamie Ash, who are in the process of accepting their offers to various grad schools. In May 2016, the 37th Commandant established the Commandant of the Marine Corps Strategist Program in order to create a cohort of officers who were capable of innovation and complex problem solving at the strategic level. Each year, 2 officers are chosen in order to attend civilian PhD programs. To date, we have officers at the American University, George Mason University, as well as Georgetown, with a third cohort making their decisions between schools such as Stanford, Johns Hopkins, and Harvard. The programs that the students are attending include government, political science, international relations, and public policy, with research interests as varied as great power competition, deterrence, artificial intelligence, as well as the relationship between the Department of State and the Department of Defense. In addition to our academic pursuits, we've also helped out with a variety of service and Marine Corps University initiatives, such as the Marine Corps Roles and Missions OPT in response to the 2018 National Defense Authorization Act, the Close Combat Lethality Task Force, the review of MCDP-1 warfighting, the development of the Ground Combat Element Plan for the Marine Corps, as well as a variety of PMEs on innovation and the future of the Marine Corps. We've also assisted with faculty development here at Marine Corps University, as well as the delivery of curriculum. We've been very fortunate as members of the Marine Corps University community to receive support from the Krulak Center in the form of assistance traveling to various academic conferences and professional opportunities. We've also been able to leverage the expertise of the chairs here as we develop our own research interests. So whether it's the China studies or the energy scholars, being able to come to the Krulak Center and leverage current PhDs in the pursuit of our own has been very valuable to us. So with the continued support of the center, it's our intent to live up to the goal of its namesake in the way that General Krulak described Marines as innovators, inventors, and thinkers, but most importantly as fighters, so that we can not only keep the Marine Corps future-looking, but always able to respond when the nation calls. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Major Matt Monroe, a resident student at Command and Staff College, and like Captain Cunningham, also a scholar in the Energy and Innovation Scholars Program with Dr. Baskin. I'd like to say thank you to the Krulak Center for inviting me to speak this morning on something that I think is a major education-enhancing initiative that the Krulak Center has put forward. If you would, I'd like each of you to take a moment this morning and indulge me in a small thought experiment. Take a moment in silence and consider 2 things. First, what was the last good idea that you had? And I'm not talking about something that you necessarily read or something that you saw on TV, but the last good idea that you yourself had. I'll be intentionally vague in what I define as a good idea, because ideas are, much like people, very individualistic. So again, take a moment and ask yourself, what was the last truly good idea that you had? Okay, so now that you have that, I'd ask you to consider where that idea originated. Take a moment and ask yourself, where did it come from? What was the seed stock or the feedstock from which that idea grew? And I'm not talking about in your mind, I'm talking about tracing that back all the way to its origins. Can you trace that lineage from where it originated to where it was when you recalled it just a moment ago? Take a second. My guess is that many of you were readily able to come up with the most recent good idea that you had. What I bet was slightly more challenging was determining where that idea came from. Ideas are challenging. Ideas are difficult like that. I would argue that ideas are not like Newton's apple. They don't fall from a tree and land in the lap of a genius to be presented to the world. It's a process. And through the Krulak Center, through Major Tim Riemann and Dr. Ann-Louise Antonoff from Command and Staff College, myself and a cohort of about 10 other students set out to determine where those ideas do come from. Ideas are the result of complex, interwoven, and often seemingly disparate encounters, discussions, ideas, inquiries. They come from things like conversations, radio shows, TV shows, podcasts, books, and the like. So as we set out on this course, aptly named Where Good Ideas Come From, we sought to find out where exactly those ideas come from. We as the students in the course received very little guidance. This was intentional. Ideas, as I said, are not something that you can trace a clean path to find. The only requirements, the only guidance that we were provided were the topics you see in the blue box on the left, and a minimum of a 200-page reading requirement. That sounds like a lot, but when you consider that the students were given the freedom to build their own syllabus for this course, they were given the topics, we then chose our own readings. They could be articles, books, etc. And I will tell you that for those of you who are familiar with mandatory reading requirements, once those syllabi were built, the students actually read every single page of that reading. In total, that brought the course, over the course of a 1-month time frame, to just shy of 32,000 pages consumed. For those of you that are looking for something to compare that to, 32,000 pages is about the size of the Encyclopedia Britannica. As I mentioned, the format was unfamiliar. The green box on the screen outlines some of the differences from standard curriculum formats and how we did things and where good ideas come from. To me, the differences that stood in sharpest contrast were the locations, the timeline, and the content. In an effort to leverage location-based learning theory, the idea that the mind learns and retains more when stimulated in a foreign environment, we took the class abroad, not to Europe or to Asia, but to far-off lands like the Stafford Library, the Krulak Center itself, and the IKEA food court. Unlike nearly every other academic course, military or civilian, Where Good Ideas Come From did not see a class-wide glancing at the watch, the not-so-subtle packing of one's things in the last minutes of class, and the subsequent mad dash for the door at the end of the 2 hours. Instead, class flowed and continued beyond the designated time, sometimes by more than an hour, simply because the conversation was of high caliber and the participants invested. You notice there are exactly 0 military topics in the blue box. But wait, isn't this an elective in a center for professional military education? What does poetry have to do with operational logistics? How does reading a book on memory for the mind relate to national defense strategy? I don't know, and I would argue that neither do any of you. Ideas are funny like that. We all struggle to identify where they come from, but perhaps and hopefully the seeds of some of the best ideas originated within the construct of this class. So stimulating was the course that it continues in a non-compulsory format in what we've come to call the Den of Deep Thought, a student-led topic-based discussion group which meets after hours to tackle other topics and further grow the neural mesh with which we approach the challenges and will approach the challenges of the coming years. I believe that one day, months or years down the road, I will be able to trace my own good ideas back to their source. Itself once a good idea, originated here in the Krulak Center for a simple elective which sparked and fueled off-site learning in non-traditional environments and led to some truly creative and innovative thoughts. Thank you.
My SBC Major Tim Riemann's here, so he told me if I didn't keep it underneath 5 minutes, I'd have to remediate. So, with that, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Captain Mike Magyar. I'm an artillery officer and currently a student at EWS. It's a privilege to speak to you today. This morning, I'm here to talk a few minutes about the Krulak Center writing program. To date, they have sponsored a total of 3 writing contests, one of which my essay titled "The HIMARS Unmanned Ground Vehicle: Emerging Fires Technology in Support of Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations" was selected for first place. It was an honor to have been selected, and the $1,000 check was greatly appreciated. In August, the Krulak Center sponsored its first creative writing contest. The prompt entailed making the case for why or why not the Commandant's reading list should include David Hackett Fisher's Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Washington's Crossing. There were 9 entries from the Marine Corps University and Marines attending PME at Fort Leavenworth. 2 winners were both EWS students. The winners accompanied the CG and Marine Corps University leadership on the Trent, New Jersey staff ride from 18 to 19 September. In December, in conjunction with the Lord Lecture, the Krulak Center and Marine Corps University Foundation held its second creative writing contest. The essay contest theme was emerging technologies and how they are shaping and defining tomorrow's battlefield. The winners were provided monetary prizes for first, second, and third place, thanks to Marine Corps University Foundation and a generous donation from the first Special Basic class of 1950. There were 29 entries, and the top 3 winners were all EWS students. Additionally, in December, Dr. Chris Harmon, Brigadier General Bowers, Marine Corps University, and the Krulak Center held a Writing for Publication workshop at Warner Hall. The workshop featured presentations by Marine Corps University Press, Marine Corps University Journal, Brookings Institute Press, the American Foreign Policy Council, and a columnist for USA Today. In March, the Krulak Center announced its third creative writing contest, which is due April 30th. The prompt is titled The Marine Corps Postmortem and is open to any Marine Corps University student. Thus far, the Krulak Center has received 9 entries and inquiries from Marines as far as Saudi Arabia and Okinawa. On Twitter, the announcement of this writing contest has been viewed more than 30,000 times. So what does this all mean? 3 points. First, it showcases the ability of the Krulak Center to reach out and impact Marines across the Corps, which is evident in the increase of writing submissions and inquiries over the past 8 months. Second, the Krulak Center is rewarding innovation and those who dare to be risk takers, Marines who weigh looking foolish to the crowd against the journey of achieving brilliance. And third, it shows that Marines are listening, reading, and eager to write on interesting and arduous topics. Our Corps must continue to evolve, and that evolution begins with a good idea articulated through writing. That concludes my brief. Once again, it's an honor and privilege to speak to you today, and I thank you for your time.
Good morning. I'm Major Jacob Clayton, a student at Command and Staff College. There it is. At the beginning of the school year, a group of students, the Gray Scholars, set out to solve a problem. And we did this in conjunction with the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. And the problem was this: how might we as a Marine Corps use a Marine expeditionary unit to generate options during expeditionary advanced base operations? The interesting thing is we've actually been trying to solve that same problem for some time. And it's just the specifics that change. And that became very apparent whenever we did the Guadalcanal PME. We were solving the same problem. So we wanted to make sure we studied what we've already studied before and see if we come up with a new answer. So we reached out to the Krulak Center, and they were able to attract world-class talent for a speaker series to better understand 3 aspects of a core question. About the environment, what can current researchers tell us about creating an operational approach to a complex situation? 2, about human perception. What can practitioners tell us about reaching peak human performance in hostile situations? Specifically, can you generate options while under fire? And third, about human augmentation. If we answer the first 2 correctly, then what technologies can augment humans in a contested environment? For the environment, Dave Snowden got us up to speed on the latest in complexity research by sharing with us a general operational approach to an obvious, complicated, complex, and even chaotic environments. We were the most interested in the operational approach to complex environments in the middle of this slide here, the probe, sense, and respond model. For human perception, Mike Weeks educated us on the integrated coaching methods for top-tier forces and Olympic athletes. that takes into account human perception at the neurological level. He also shared how coaches help teams to exploit emerging opportunities in harsh environments. And lastly, for human augmentation, a host of speakers shared their work in machine learning, augmented reality, and energy systems to enable the warfighter. So pulling all this research together, we think a team that can understand what kind of system they're operating in and apply the appropriate approach can gain a significant advantage. Specifically, in complex environments, Marines can generate options by employing many concurrent, safe-to-fail experiments that impose costs at the tactical level. This speaker series validated some of what we already knew in our warfighting doctrine, but we discovered some new things and found a huge opportunity in an integrated human performance coaching methods. So, what is the Krulak Center about? To us, I think it's about generating ideas and connecting those ideas to the right people in the Marine Corps. This speaker series did that by helping us to answer a larger question. How do we continue to create and improve the finest naval warfighters? So, thank you to the Krulak Center, Ms. Jackson especially, for this great opportunity. And I want to thank everyone who was able to help out the Gray Scholars this year. Semper Fi.
So good morning. My name is Major Sarah Wood, and I've had the opportunity to participate in a number of Krulak Center programs as a student at command and staff. One of those programs is a cyber intelligence elective taught by J.D. Work. I don't think he's here today. He's off doing J.D. things, which explored the range of cyber conflict in the contemporary operating environment through the lens of unclassified, industry, non-governmental, and multinational reporting in order to study a current picture of cyber capabilities and their employment by hostile actors and intrusion and attack networks. What was interesting, I've done a number of cyber classes. They've all usually been at the TSSCI level, but doing it at the unclassified level and really digging into the industry reporting, which is usually where we get most of our tippers, allowed us to do a lot of other things in the class. So as a class, we discussed the role and objective of offensive and defensive cyber operations, the different legal and ethical frameworks, adversary attribution, intentions, proliferation, and appropriate countering responses. We also explored Chinese and Russians writing on cyber warfare and coercion, along with debates about military intelligence, convergence of Title 10 and Title 50. The course ended with a crisis exercise focused on Venezuela, with the students acting as private military contractors as opposed to acting as a military, in order to explore the what-ifs and not constrained by the law of armed conflict or other norms. This created a unique environment to explore second and third order effects and gave the students permission to employ innovative tools, tactics, techniques not often considered in the current operating environment. Okay, so another Krulak Center I was involved in is Project Destination Unknown. This project is a series of graphic novels created by Majors Adam Yang and Austin Duncan, who's out in the crowd today, in order to challenge current assumptions and consider ideas not consistent with current beliefs about warfighting. In order to allow for creative freedom, Destination Unknown series takes place in 2075, because this time horizon is well past the best forecasts in the Pentagon and far enough in the future to show a contrast between conditions then and now, yet still conceptually familiar with readers today. Authors and illustrators are Marines, both officers and enlisted, across the fleet and from varying MOSs. The writing prompts given to the authors included exploring artificial intelligence used in both decision-making and recruiting, joint military operations in space, and then the story I wrote on unmanned vehicles completely replacing manned fighter aircraft. These prompts were designed to check current assumptions on security affairs, consider scenarios that do not align with our current concepts, and possibly provide answers to military problems we didn't even know to ask. Equally crucial, the illustrators would then bring these stories into visual reality, which you can see in the slide above. The numerous opportunities that the Krulak Center has offered during my time as a student command and staff has greatly enhanced my overall experience by promoting creativity and encouraging innovation. As a result, I've approached wargaming exercises and academic papers with a different mindset, focused more on the what is possible as opposed to what is currently expected. I'm really looking forward to how the Krulak Center will continue supporting our complex warfighting challenges. So thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gunny Sergeant Bird, and on behalf of the Krulak Center, I'm here to represent wargaming. Right now, I'd like to thank Senator Warner, General Krulak, General Gray, Major General Weiss, Major General Mullen, Brigadier General Bauer specifically for inviting me here today, and guests. In my current billet, I'm a warfighting curriculum developer for the enlisted college. My job is simple, and then I use my experience as an infantry marine and education to design, develop, and assist in implementing approved curriculum. Recently, my office was asked what we all thought was a simple question by our director. And that was, how do we improve the quality of conversation between commissioned and non-commissioned officers? After thinking about what it was officers knew and enlisted did not, a group of us staff and COs from the enlisted college volunteered to take part in a wargaming exercise, Sea Dragon, here at the Krulak Center to find out. 2 infantry gunnery sergeants, 1 intelligence staff sergeant, 1 staff sergeant parachute rigger, 1 administrative staff sergeant, all stepped up to play against 7 other teams, all consisting of officers. As the only enlisted team, our purpose in accepting such a challenge was to see if we could be placed on the same level as those with whom we work with and work for, both in terms of credentials and on the basis of knowledge and expertise of problem framing, courses of action development, and courses of action wargaming. Wanting to answer our director's initial question and continue to test our own abilities as leaders, we set to work and formed a small planning team and began developing courses of action to the Krulak Center's wargaming known problem. We knew we were underdogs, going against all officer teams from command and staff, EWS, and McWar. However, unfazed, we were determined to answer the question, and after a 2-hour fight here in the Krulak Center, we emerged with a respectable score against experienced EWS officers. The results of our own planning and actions caused us to become introspective of our own performance. What is the aim of the enlisted development compared to the officers, and how does that match the expectations of enlisted Marines? What could enlisted Marines gain from wargaming exercises against not only themselves, but officers? And how do these expectations match the expectations of the Marine Corps? Definitionally, wargaming pits friendly courses of action against an adversary's courses of action to identify strengths and weaknesses of our courses of action and opportunities that can be exploited in future operations. The results of wargaming, like all other planning steps, improve the commander's understanding of the problem and influence their vision and actions. A better understanding of this problem inevitably leads to plan adjustments. Planners can conduct war games either manually or through computer simulations. The results of wargaming inform courses of action, comparison and decision, but more importantly, wargaming generates an intuitive level of understanding about the problem that will accelerate decision-making during execution. In 2015, an interview by General Gray said this about war games. We need to go back and have multiple war games, not just small wars, but big-time war games. The generals need to be involved, the colonels, everybody needs to be involved, including the staff and COs, and we need to go through a sort of intellectual renaissance. This was also echoed by Lieutenant General Van Ripper, who stated that wargaming is one of the things I think I've observed that has slipped away. If you do not do force on force, you are kidding yourself. If you do one-sided exercise against a script or teaching point, it is a waste of time. The Marine Corps reference publication 6-11 Delta, Sustain the Transformation, states, Marines today are challenged to operate in the complex environments of peace, crisis, war, all within a very short period of time, or simultaneously during the same operation. This promises to be commonplace in future conflicts. Today's battlefield is increasingly technologically supercharged. often ill-defined and compounded by the confusion of modern warfare characteristics. With the completion of a $150,000 war room located here at the Krulak Center, 3 war games, both tabletop and force-on-force computerized simulations, over 170 students, sister service, civilians, international partners, and now enlisted trained, I believe the Marine Corps has taken the next step in not only officer development for the next fight, but that of the staff non-commissioned and non-commissioned officer as well. And although our small staff and CO team did not win in Sea Dragon, we took 3rd place, which I think is respectable. We're against officers, so that was respectable. And it was a big peepee, so we tried. They were cheating, yes, sir. The Krulak Center Sea Dragon War Game exercise provided us the opportunity to discover common basis of knowledge of operational planning and execution at the tactical level of war between Marine officers and enlisted. This also was a breakthrough in what we had answered to the question Colonel C.J. Williams, director of the Enlisted College, and that was to enhance the conversation between Marine officers and enlisted, exercises like Sea Dragon are important. And what is being done here at the Krulak Center is leading the way in that. Thank you.
Nope. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Major John Hunefeld. I'm an artillery officer, and I'm a student at Command Staff College. I'm here this morning to talk about the China Studies program at the Krulak Center. The China Studies program is headed by Dr. Christopher Young, who is the Donald Bren Chair for Non-Western Strategic Thought. And Dr. Young, if you could raise your hand so I can embarrass you appropriately, thank you. In this capacity, Dr. Young is also the Director for East Asia Studies at Marine Corps University. And in this role, he lectures across the different schools inside the university system on topics of China and East Asia security. He also conducts his own research on Chinese expeditionary warfare capabilities and doctrine, emerging Chinese foreign and defense policy, and China's emerging maritime capabilities and strategies, all topics I think we can agree are of significant relevance to our Corps. In his capacity as a guest lecturer for the Marine Corps University and for Command Staff College, Dr. Young also conducts a 10-week elective in the winter on Chinese strategic thought from Sun Tzu to the present. And one of the reasons I'm up here talking today is I was a student in that elective. And just to briefly talk about some of the topics that we covered in this elective, Chinese strategic culture, China's national security decision-making, China's internal security, regional and territorial challenges, China's cyber strategy, defense modernization and force structure development, grand strategy, as well as what is a better U.S. response or strategy for the Indo-PACOM region. I am completely short-selling the number of topics and the depth of our discussion inside of that class, but suffice to say that it was an expansive and in-depth examination of both the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army. This class really provided, I think, context and perspective for the student officer, no matter what your future assignment is, whether that's headed up to the Pentagon, to Headquarters Marine Corps, or out to the operating forces. In my case, back out to 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force in Okinawa, Japan. During our elective, Dr. Young also chaired with the Krulak Center a 2-day symposium in conjunction with the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab Futures Directorate, bringing some of the best China experts across the National Capital Region here to this very auditorium to discuss Chinese strategy, Chinese intentions, and the risks and possibilities in engaging with China. While this was incredibly informative and interesting for me as a student, I think more importantly, it helped inform a joint working group's knowledge of the key region for national strategic competition. And then finally, as all students at Command Staff College are encouraged to pursue a Master of Military Science, I myself sought out Dr. Young in the Krulak Center for my own research into how the U.S. and Japan manage engagement with China. And through my work with Dr. Young, I've been able to meet, talk with, and correspond with some of our nation's top experts on both China and Japan, to include former U.S. ambassadors, defense attachés, other expert hands on the East Asia region, as well as some of Japan's leading policymakers, senior officers, and defense analysts. And through working with Dr. Young, I've been exposed truly to a greater world of policy, defense, and academic thinkers than I ever expected. In closing, I just want to say, through working with Dr. Young at the Krulak Center, as the Bren Chair for Non-Western Strategic Thought, I've been able to research deeply and think critically beyond truly what I would have found in books or online databases. And I think it's fitting that the Krulak Center, named after a Marine visionary, is staffed with folks like Dr. Young and the other programs that you've heard about this morning, who help Marines, service members, and our interagency partners think critically and creatively about topics that are likely to have direct relevance to our nation's future. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, it's my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce the gentleman from Virginia, Senator John Warner.
Do we have a hand mic? No, how about that one you have? What you doing? Pocket and take it away?
He's bringing one up. I got a mic.
Can't do the trick. Just turn them on, guys.
You'll be turning me on. Retired senator, a microphone is a dangerous thing in the world. Here we go. Thank you. Thank you, Al. Just hope as you watch me trip up here, when you hit 92, you can still march. Thank you. Now, serious folks, this was a challenge to listen to all these extremely bright persons speak and to condense it into 5 months with my cornball presentation and a few facts scattered in between. But why am I here? I had a most wonderful father, and he was a young doctor in World War I, an Army captain, and he spent 7 months in France. And his job was triage. As a junior officer in his medical battalion, or one of the several, the juniors got it, they were sent out at dawn when the stretcher bearers would be able to go out and find the wounded from the cannonades and other operations during the night and bring them back. And my father had, he said, maybe 2 minutes a man to scrape off some of the mud, open the uniform, and determine, is there anything that surgery or medicine can do for this man? If not, send him to the morphine ward and take care of him there. Send the other one to surgery. And I tell that story because I grew up wanting to be a Marine the worst way. And I adored my father, and he sparingly talked to me about the war from time to time. And actually, those of us that grew up and were of an age group where we were watching, sure enough, we were going to be in the thing ourselves. And so I told him, Father, I wanted to be a Marine. No, you're not going to be a Marine. And this argument went on. In the fall of 1944, we had the Battle of the Bulge. And they put out this call, all good, Colonel, all men of, how did it go? Come to the 80-year country now, all 17-year-olds. And you can enlist in your service at 17 at that time and pretty well get your choice. And so I wanted to go Marines and get Marines. And the day came up, we got in a big argument. I told Father, I'm quitting school, not going back, and you either sign the paper, give me the right to go in the Marines, or I'm going to lie for the first time. And I know how to do it and get the hell out of here. So anyway, he won the argument. I went in the Navy. But the Navy, I don't mean to demean the Navy. They were great. And the next point I want to make, I tie points into this. Off we go into the Navy. We lost in that Battle of the Bulge the greatest number of casualties of any single engagement we were in World War II. And the full significance of it was never really learned until finally the clouds opened up and the Air Corps could come in and write the right the ship and give us the balance to win. But it always struck me as the importance of intelligence. When we lost it, it was like they took an arm off of us. And we lost it because of the clouds and took those terrific casualties. So here I am, 17, all thinking about all these big things. And I went down, mother, father took me down, put me on an old steam train, and it took us 3 days to get from Washington, D.C. up to Great Lakes Naval Training Station. Well, I'd been raised, frankly, in a very privileged community by the National Cathedral and blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't that good in school because I just majored in girls and beer and a little school here and there. But now it was serious business. So picture me getting on that train, saying goodbye, and you got to remember, in my young years, there was no gasoline. You didn't travel. You stayed in your neighborhood. And so I really didn't know a lot about the periphery of this country or who else lived in it. But I got on that train, and that train took 3 days to get up there because all of the passenger trains were third-class ratings, and the freight and the military trains, you were pulled into a siding, you never knew where you get off, and all the other trains went by. I remember we looked at the guns on the decks and all the stuff that went roaring through. And we finally got to Great Lakes, but going up on the train, I learned a lot about men and women that I'd never known in my life. The train was idle at various times, and the boys, some of the boys who were smarter than I, figured out how to bribe the conductor and find out where the nearest liquor was, and they all jump off the trains and go out and barrel up with liquor and get back on the trains. And we didn't have any food. We just lived on liquor till we got to boot camp. Lesson number one. Lesson number two, we walked in about 4 o'clock in the morning, big auditorium, probably had about 250 to 300 guys on that train, and a big old pot-bellied chief petty officer got up and said, "All right, all you guys who can't read and write, raise your hand." I'm saying to myself, what? Read and write? A third of these guys raised their hand. They could not read and write. That was the demographics of America. And we were hitting the bottom then, trying to scrape up guys to replenish some of the losses. We had Iwo Jima going at that time, and we were soaked up in big wars in the Pacific and overseas. So the old chief said, "Now you smart guys help the others fill out the forms." And that was my first lesson. You got to help that guy on your right or left and help him in any number of ways, not only to read and write, but for the rest of your military career, because your life could be dependent upon him to do his job to save your butt. It's as simple as that. So I was learning things pretty fast. Well, fast forward, I did very well in the program they had, and they made me an electronic technician's mate. Now, I mention that because I watched the cyber presentation. Who gave that? Right? Oh, yes, Major. Well, this country now is faced, in my humble judgment, and mind you, I sat up there in the Puzzle Palace, the U.S. Senate, for 30 years, and 12 of those years I was either chairman or ranking of the member of the committee, so I had a lot of responsibilities. But things have changed, and they're changing very, very rapidly. And I had the fortune of meeting our distinguished guest here, head of the Brookings Institution. We chatted a minute, and gracious alive, he's way ahead of me. You're way ahead of me. The Marines are out there beginning to determine what adjustments are needed to fight an electronic warfare. And this circles me all the way back to my boot camp in DI. He had one rule. This is your rifle, this is your gun, this is going to save you. Forget every other thing, how that thing went. And if you don't treat it or mistreat it, you're going to sleep with it. Well, like everybody else, I slept with my rifle a couple of times. That rifle may be of no value to anybody if what we're facing coming our way. And it's so exciting for me to come down here today and pick up and learning from various persons in a short period of time. The good old Corps are moving out, ahead of the Army and head of the Air Force and all these guys. And by God, you're going to do it again. I don't know, however, if you're going to bury the term jarhead. How many have heard that? Come on, get those hands up there. My generation, we were all called jarheads. Well, I didn't pay any attention to it, laughed in my days in the Corps. But let me tell you the origin of jarhead. It was mentioned about World War I. I've studied it extensively recently, primarily because of my father, and I'm going to lecture tomorrow night on it. But the Army, Pershing did not like the Marine Corps. And he did everything he could to keep the Marines out of Europe. He didn't need them and he didn't want them. And fortunately, the Secretary of the Navy went to Wilson and insisted that the Marine Corps be represented. And Lejeune had the good fortune, we have a wonderful general officer he was. He took the first ones over. Okay, this is the point of this story. The Marines were all trained and equipped and everything. They had no helmets, mind you, and they were ready to be shipped out without helmets. And they wired ahead or wherever they communicated in those days. And Pershing came back, I'll be damned if I'm going to give any of those Army helmets to the Marines. They're on their own. Well, how many of you had Grandma ever make jam in a ball jar? Know that? Well, a guy named Ball with a lot of money ran the ball jar company. He financed the program to buy all the Marine Corps helmets. And that's how we got to be known as jarheads. Okay. And you're here with another challenging chapter ahead of you to bury that term forever. Because by God, I'm proud of the Marines and all that you've done. Now, I'll stop palavering. I really look forward to today. I argued for a long time about my name being put on this building. I told old Jim Amos, Commandant, good God, Jim, you back, look at my record, it's nowhere there. Well, we looked in the record, he came back, oh, we can swallow all that, we can get it. No. Well, anyway, I'm so deeply honored, and I try and get down as often as I can just to salute you and to continue my learning process. Because I learned more as a recruit in the Navy and the Marine Corps. They were two of the best learning experiences of my life. You either learned or you perished, but you learned well. And to see this wonderful place moving out in this direction, it's exciting, it's needed, and desperately needed to defend ourselves. And that old rifle, it's the only thing that I ever stole in my life. Because when I finished range duty, I'd been a pretty good shot, and part-time I was an instructor, and I figured out how I was going to steal that thing, and I did steal it, and it's in my bedroom, and it hangs over my bed. And it always will be there. My God. I haven't convinced any of the wives to take it in the bed with me, but there she is. But the point of the story is that you have got to impress on people, yes, we'll keep those rifles, but they may not be needed. Now look, all that adds up to nothing if I contributed this morning. And my sole honor here is to tell a little about our honored guest, General Krulak. I was, I think, if not I never really fully checked out, the youngest Secretary of the Navy and undersecretary, and then a fellow named John Chafee took it because he wanted to run for the Senate. So he had it for a year, Secretary, and then I moved up. Wonderful man. He was on Guadalcanal as a Marine, quit Yale, went straight into Marines, served on Guadalcanal, came back. And in those days, they circled him right out of there and sent him to Officers Candidate School and then right back to the Pacific with gold bars. And John was a wonderful man. And the two of us, oh God, I'll never forget the first day as in our secretariat. This great system and democracy of ours is dependent on, as the Constitution says, the executive branch control the military and so forth, all for the good. But imagine, here I was a prosecutor, U.S. attorney, and lawyer. Chafee had been a politician, he'd been governor of Rhode Island. And the two of us were assigned as he's secretary, I'm undersecretary, and we reported for duty. And nobody had really studied what was about to happen. And it was the first time in history, and I think the last time it's ever happened, 2 Marines took over the Department of the Navy. And you're talking about the fear in the hearts of the sailors. They never got over it. But we managed that job together. And so fast forwarding from that point back to why I'm here. In the course of my duties there, I made a lot of trips to Vietnam. We're not here to go into the depths of that debate. It weighs on my heart to this day, but I was there for 5 years, 4 months, and 3 days in that secretariat, and many trips over there. And one trip in particular I'll never forget. It was early on, I think I was undersecretary, I'm pretty sure it was, because I had a wonderful Marine appointed as my military aide. And the point I was trying to get is that we transitioned literally from our civilian jobs to take over the Navy jobs, and it's done in 20 minutes. You literally walk into the Pentagon, you issued your badge, and you're suddenly Undersecretary or Secretary of the Navy. And you walk in the office and get what? The first thing that greets you, fortunately, your military aides. Sir, here's today's work, and here's a stack of papers that big, and you got to go through and start operating the day you're there. And I was fortunate to get 2 of my naval guys made C&O, but the Marines were equally as good. And so this particular Marine aide and I were suiting up to go over on a trip to Vietnam. And I'll never forget Herman the German. Who remembers Herman the German? He was in charge of all forces at that time, Marine forces. And he met us, and this aide started briefing me on Herman the German and said, the best thing you do is listen most of the time. Don't try to get any ideas of your own. Just soak it up and take it home. But he was a wonderful guy, and he took us all around for about 3 days. And he told the left switch, he said, you show that young secretary everything he needs to see, and plus, you got it? And this, I remember aide said, yes, sir, because I can't spend a lot of time with you guys. Check in with me when you're here, like we're doing today, first day. Check in with me when you leave. So this Marine Corps aide and I said to him, hey, look, I'm an ex-Marine. While I wasn't in a whole lot of combat or anything during my tour in Korea, or I mean, wherever the hell I was, let's go up and see the whole thing. So we just threw the rule book away and went wherever the Marines were, and the most advanced locations. And we went. He took me up to a fire base. We were understanding how those bases were co-located and very quickly put together to cover a field of fire for the operation the next day and so forth. And we're up at there, and all of a sudden, some guy came up and said, everybody's got to make way. We're bringing casualties in. We're going to have to put them on the secretary's plane because we got to get them out of here. And I said, the plane's yours. We had an old DC-3, 4, whatever it was. And so in came the whirlies with the casualties and landing, and I sort of went over to do what I could, and there's not much you can do to a casualty, console them. And I was looking at the toe tags, and I went around and said to this guy, you know, I think you're going to be all right. You're going to make it. You're going to make it. And the guys, most of them, you know, look at you and maybe smile. So anyway, fast forward, I'm now secretary. I'm now clearing another man through to be commandant of the Marine Corps. And we go through the usual 2 hours of his finances and, you know, how many bank accounts, how many stocks. Well, Marines have nothing anyway, so we went through that pretty fast. And we got up to leave, and this fine man, old Mundy, was with him. We brought him in. And he's very polite, and he said, Mr. Secretary, this is not the first time we met. I said, oh, really? And people often say that to secretaries. And first thing is a shock. Did I step on this guy's toes or ball him out or what? And he said, oh, no, I was one of those guys on the fire base, and you came over and you grabbed my toe tag, and you said to me, you're going to be all right. I'm here to tell you I'm all right. That's General Krulak right there. And so I'll travel the last mile to see him wherever he goes. Of course, he ran off in high academia somewhere. And how the hell did you pass all those tests? Anyway, and quickly, the next man to his right is someone, Al Gray, that I'll never forget. I had a big farm down in Virginia, and Ronald Reagan and I got to know each other quite well when he was president. And he called me up, you know, out of the blue and said, God, I got to get the hell out of here. I'm going crazy. I need to come on down. How about you got some horses? And I said, yeah, I got plenty of them. He says, I'll bring my saddle. I'm coming down. We're going down. He used to come down the farm and go riding with me. And so I got to know him quite well. And then the word spread through the aide ranks and things that Reagan would want me to come over and do some things, interesting things with him, quite interesting. And got the call, well, I forgot exactly how it was, but I was at my desk, and it was around 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, and Reagan called me up. He said, great God, he said, what the hell happened over there in the barracks? How did they blow up, sir? I said, sir, I don't know. I'm watching the television. None of us have any details. Well, you're on the army, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, John Tower was then an old Texas Wrangler. He was the senior Republican. And he said, I want you and John to get, I wouldn't give you all the words, over there tonight and find out what happened. And along the way, I'm going to ask you to do some other things. But suit up, go. I said, sir, we'll be wheels up at 1800. We'll be there. So I called up the liaison officer, and a brand new, he was then major and then later made colonel a month or two later. I said, get your ass up here right away. I'm in charge of this trip, and the senior Republican's going with me. He said, yes, sir, I'll be right up there. And he comes up with his pad under his arm, and I'd met him casually somewhere one time, Jim Jones. So he was my escort officer. Well, I forgot to mention, back on the fire base, my escort officer that took me all through my first trip, or one of my early trips to Vietnam, was none other than Bill Lynch. So who was the major talking about the ideas dropping out of the tree? Oh yeah, I got to correct you. I did drop out of a tree. And I hit the ground and bounced and had the best luck of receiving military aids of anybody. Two of them made C&O, Chief of Naval Operations, and the Marines all did well. But poor old Bill Leftwich, I made the sad decision, had a terrible fight with him. He wanted to go back for a third tour to Vietnam. I said, you got the Navy Cross, the Silver Star? what do you hope to achieve? You're going to be a 4-star someday yourself if you just keep it clean. I want to go. And he went, and he lost his life 4 or 5 weeks after he left. Marvelous man. So you see, I've had a lot of luck, and the Corps is what has developed me so much throughout my entire life. So back to my last few words, and thank you for your patience of indulging me. But so Reagan calls me up, says, get your ass over there. Yes, sir, we're going. So we went over, and old Jim Jones was the escort officer, and he had us go in on site. We were there at dawn, and there wasn't much you could make out of it. I mean, the place was in just shock and the death, and then we're still bringing the bodies out. And so we got as best we could a briefing, and it all came down to that perimeter security was just no damn good, or it wasn't that tight to protect it. Anyway, then Reagan sent us around to visit 6 other countries, in and out quickly, to just assure them that the United States was not going to pull out of the Middle East because of this tragedy, period. And you bring that lesson home. So we did. Tara and I did it in, I think, 6 days, and came back and went to the Oval Office and had a long session with the Joint Staff and told them what we'd found. But so that was that chapter. Then I'd forgotten what the interval of time is. Phone rang. Reagan wanted to talk to me. I thought we were talking about horses or something. Oh, no, he said, oh, I know. The time limit was about 10 days or 2 weeks. And he called me up and he said, they're going to bring the bodies home, and I want to go down. So set up a trip for me to go down to Camp Lejeune, and I want to be on that ground when that plane lands. So I went down with him, and it was a ceremony I shall never forget. And then I've been to a lot of military funerals and things in my lifetime. But it was a cold day in November, rainy, and Mrs. Reagan went down with us. So just the President, Mrs. Reagan, and myself, and a military aide was in the plane too. And we went down there, and I'd worked out a time schedule with the commander of the base and so forth. We knew pretty much what we were going to do. And so commander of the base met us, and we went through the scheduled routine. And Reagan sat there, and Mrs. Reagan, and one by one, the widows and the children came through. And the commandant of the base at that time knew the name of every one of them. No crib sheet, no pull out a note, he knew the name of everyone. And going back on the plane that night, Nancy, Mrs. Reagan, had gone to bed. She was tired out. I don't blame her. Because we extended the trip a good hour and a half, I think, to do that. And Reagan, he just loved pizza, and I'll never forget. They brought the biggest damn pizza I ever saw. It fell all over the plate. It was dripping on the floor and the whole thing, and he ate this whole thing up. Well, I was pretty well weary. I said I got to last another hour to get back. So I ate my pizza as best I could. But in the course of that discussion, he says, you know, I've been around public ceremonies. I've done all this. I do all this. Man, am I impressed with that guy that handled, that base commander, handled it. Keep me advised about the guy. What's he going to do? I don't know. And I was on the Armed Services Committee, of course, and all those nominations came before us. Yes, Mr. President, I was seeing some of the nom sheets coming through, and I could space out what this vacancy was going to be. So I called him up and I said, you know, in about 60 or 90 days, you're going to make a tough decision. You got to pick a new commandant. He says, well, send me the notes you had with you that night about that guy. I said, okay. That was the end of it. There's that guy sitting right there now, Al Gray. So I have successfully made a landing, and having been in those old boats that we're celebrating, I thank you for the opportunity to come down and have a few words with you. But I just want you to know this is one Marine who has no great career as a Marine, but boy, I took care of the Marines when I was in the Senate for 30 years. And I just wish you all well, and thank you for again and again and again being the point of the spear as we devise our strategy here in this country, how best to defend ourselves. With your leave, adieu, sir. Yeah.
I'm glad I don't have to rely on my memory for this last part, but thank you very much, sir, for those wonderful words, inspiring. Thank you so much. So this is everyone's favorite part. This is the closing, but at first I would be remiss if I didn't thank some very important people that have really supported the Krulak Center from start to finish. So Brigadier General Bowers, sir, thank you for you and your staff. You've been absolutely fantastic. I'd also like to thank the entire office of VPAA, G4 and Facilities, Dr. Ben Jensen, Jen and Cater from the museum's outreach team, Faith and the GRC team, Lieutenant General Mills, John, and the entire McCuff team. And most importantly, to you, General Krulak, sir, your support means the world. Thank you. Finally, I'd like to cast my vision for the Krulak Center. I told my interview committee that my goal was to make the Krulak Center the premier center for innovation and creativity in the world, a model for all to emulate. Why wouldn't I say that? I have core, cognition, and Krulak on my side. Okay, with that, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the opening session. After the departure of our distinguished guests, please join us upstairs for a small ceremony and, most importantly, some cake. Thank you very much.